Hey, how's it going, everybody, and welcome back into the SFS channel, and happy Thanksgiving to all of you guys out there. We're going to keep today's episode relatively short. We want to get you guys on your way, set up with your information, and then able to go hang out with your families, enjoy Thanksgiving, and hopefully eat some delicious meals. Today, we've got NFL action, though, 3 games. That's why the rankings episodes are coming out a day early. We've also got our wide receivers episode up in addition to this video. But here you guys will see my prop bet for this afternoon for the Dallas Cowboys and the Las Vegas Raiders. If you guys would like to play alongside me and join me playing some prop bets on thrivefantasy.com, you guys can go over, get yourself set up with a new account, and when you deposit between $10 and $100 using promo code SIZZLE, that's SIZZLE, you can see that on your screen right now, you'll get an instant deposit match bonus of up to 100% of whatever you put in between that $10 and $100 increment. And then on top of that, once you play a game on your Thrive Fantasy account, they're going to let me know you've went ahead and done that, and we'll get you set up with a free month of SFS Gold, which means I'm setting your lineup for you every week. You get my top 48 running back and wide receiver rankings for every week, in addition to quarterbacks, tight ends, and defenses, and a whole lot more interactive content and information from us here at SFS. So we're not wasting any more time, though. We've got our top 24 running backs for Week 12 in this episode. Go check out Thrive Fantasy, and let's hit the intro and get this thing started. Alright, here we go. As I mentioned in the intro, I don't want to take up too much of your guys' time today. We're supposed to be spending it with our families. Maybe watching some football, but at the end of the day, family's what's most important today. So we're going to get these episodes out. We're going to talk through these players, but we're not going to go into the usual specific amounts of detail that we do here on the channel. Because again, usually these videos tend to span onwards of 40 minutes plus per each of these top 24 episodes. We're going to try and keep that around 30 if we can. I guess you guys will be seeing before I will if I actually meet that marker or that goal. But here we go. Let's get things started, not wasting more time. So Christian McCaffrey is my number 1 running back for this week, taking on Miami. This has more to do with the other running back schedules than it necessarily does me overly loving McCaffrey's game this week. Now, Miami is a favorable opponent. I think CMC can do very well as a rusher and receiver in this contest. But as you'll see here, my typical RB1 would be Jonathan Taylor for this week. And after last week, maybe I should be learning my lesson here. Maybe I should just go ahead and put Jonathan Taylor as the number 1 fantasy running back for Week 12, taking on Tampa Bay. After last week, the previously number 1 ranked unit against opposing fantasy running backs, the Buffalo Bills, were absolutely gashed for over 200 yards from scrimmage and 5 total touchdowns. JT has been phenomenal the last 5-6 weeks of this season, and the overall numbers, the touchdowns he's been producing, the yards from scrimmage, all the production you could ask for has been there. The upside, the floor, it's been fantastic. He got off to a slower start this season, but ever since, he has not looked back even once, and he has been off to the races here, leading the league in rushing yards right now. And that 5-touchdown performance puts him right back in the mix of things for total scrimmage touchdowns this year. So James Conner, watch out. He might not be the champion come the year's end, as it looked like he was going to be for a long time when he was keeping pace with Derrick Henry early on this season. But JT here, Tampa Bay's a tough matchup. That's why we've got him down at number 2. But again, you could very easily argue him as your number 1 back. Dalvin Cook at number 3, taking on San Francisco. You give me a back that gets as many touches, as much volume, and has an offense predicated around him like Dalvin Cook does in Minnesota. You see him get the job done in some way, shape, or form basically every week. Whether it's just getting the yards he needs, whether it's finding the end zone, he finds the combination to get the job done. He's got one of the best fantasy floors. He's reliable, and he's also got a ceiling as well. San Francisco is not a cakewalk of a unit for opposing running backs, but they're not something that scares me either. Najee taking on the Cincinnati Bengals, my number 4 back for this week. Cincinnati started off the season hot. They started off as a very productive unit against the run. But looking back now, the past month or so, they've been really struggling, especially after contact. Running backs are breaking tackles. They're getting into the second and third levels of this defense. When the first line of defense is not able to bring that back down, things get a bit ugly. And they've allowed some pretty large performances since that beginning part of the season when they were a fully healthy and loaded defensive unit. Najee's the identity of this Pittsburgh Steelers offense now. It's dink and dunk, short passing game, and getting the football to Najee Harris, playing smash mouth football and then playing defense on the back end of things. Najee gets a lot of volume too. We talked about this past week, or earlier on this week, I should say, how the 17 touches he had in week 11 was a quiet outing for him. And that was really only, it's crazy to say this, it was only as low as 17 total touches because he was put into concussion protocol and wasn't able to play the entirety of the 4 quarters of that game against the Chargers. So Najee, he's a top 5 running back rest of season. He's our number 4 back for week 12. Austin Ekeler right behind him at number 5, taking on Denver this week. One of the most dynamic players in fantasy. You've given me a matchup where I feel the Chargers overall will control the pace of this game. I don't necessarily think that Austin Ekeler is going to run all over Denver's defense, but when you give me the added element of what he does in the receiving game on top of what he can do as a rusher and this offensive line productivity the last couple of weeks here, I'm feeling really good about this matchup. He's going to get enough volume. He's going to get enough opportunities and usage to be a very productive fantasy scorer this week. Him and Jonathan Taylor were something to watch last week. I would expect not quite those numbers. It would be ridiculous if they totaled for 9 total touchdowns again this week. Probably not going to happen. That's a slim to none chance that actually occurs. But we could maybe get between 3 or 4 touchdowns out of this pair. You never know. They're just amongst the top producers week over week, and they're some of the most exciting players to watch in the league. Joe Mixon, I'll take him at number 6 this week on the other side of that Najee Harris game, taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Joe Mixon's been on a tear lately. 4 of his last 5 games, he's got 22.5 or more points in half PPR scoring. And there we go, bringing up half PPR for the first time. Yet another rankings episode. I forget to preface at the top of things, these are half PPR rankings. So I'm meeting you guys playing standard, and those of you playing PPR in the middle here and trying to get some balanced rankings out for you all. I'm not weighing receptions overly heavily. I'm also not weighing receptions as a part of boosted fantasy productivity. So Joe Mixon, the touchdowns have been excellent. He's on a hot streak there right now. Again, that ceiling for the last 5 weeks has been phenomenal as well. And the volume took a significant step up in week 11, which was something nice to see, getting him back to those overall workhorse numbers. I think Cincinnati could win this game. Joe Mixon could be a big part of that. DeAndre Swift here at number 7. I've got him higher than some others out there just for the simple fact I like the dynamic ability here against Chicago, and DeAndre Swift right now is really the Lions' only hope of moving the football. Running the ball, Dan Campbell has been absolutely pounding the rock the last few weeks, keeping the ball out of the hands of quarterbacks and making sure that DeAndre Swift is really in control of whether or not this team is moving the ball downfield. Catching passes, getting the job done in the running game, back-to-back 130-yard rushing yard performances. That's what makes it even more impressive, is that you're not getting 130 scrimmage yards. Swift is giving you that on the ground alone. Sprinkle in some more receptions there, get him some more involvement, and get those PPR numbers boosted up a little bit if he finds the end zone. And what's actually a very winnable game for Detroit this week. I think DeAndre Swift will be right in the thick of things for a top-level producer this week. Nick Chubb at number 8. The opposite of DeAndre Swift here. Not really expecting him to catch passes. Baltimore is a tougher matchup for Nick Chubb. Now, it's definitely not one of the premier shutdown run defensive units, but I think this is a matchup where, with how banged up Baker Mayfield is right now, I mean, maybe this is another thing that makes this situation a bit more difficult to project for later on this week, as this is going out Thursday morning, whether or not Kareem Hunt, who's been activated and back to practice off the IR, will actually play in this game. That also plays a crucial role in Nick Chubb's evaluation here at number 8. But if Hunt is out there, the expectation, again, is that Nick Chubb is not catching passes. There might be some touchdown vulturing going on, and overall the ceiling for Chubb this week is a bit lower than it's been the last few times out for him. So Baltimore's a respectable opponent. The Browns' offense hasn't been overly productive as of late. Last week they got the job done against Detroit, but again, that's a very easy matchup for them. Ezekiel Elliott at number 9 here. I'm actually contemplating, and we'll see that Kareem Hunt news and injury status could potentially lead me to have Zeke hop over a Nick Chubb into that number 8 spot. But taking on the Las Vegas Raiders here on Thanksgiving, so he'll be playing today for those of you who are watching this right now on Thanksgiving morning when this episode is going up. Zeke at number 9 here is a player I just feel has very steady value and has the chance to just give us really solid floor numbers this week. Zeke talked about it himself. The Cowboys need to get back to running the football more when this team is balanced. They're at their best. their defense is able to play in favorable situations and try and get after the passer if they're defending a lead. And Zeke plays a big part of that. So when you're down potentially Amari Cooper this week, actually I think Amari Cooper is for sure out because of COVID protocols. There's still no guarantee. Now we'll find this information out later, and by the time this episode's going up, as we're recording late Wednesday evening, there could be more news and an update on this prior to game time. There will be, because what did the Cowboys play in the early window? I forget if they're in the early or middle block of those 3 games. But CeeDee Lamb just needs to, he's back in practicing. He's cleared the team's concussion protocols, and it didn't sound like he was going to be able to play earlier on in the week, but now it seems like that's the expectation. CD could now potentially play in this game against the Raiders if he is able to clear concussion protocols from a independent doctor not associated with the team or the NFL. So it's a bit of a wishy-washy situation. Essentially, CD has one more hurdle to climb before he'll be able to be out there for that contest. But if that's the case, we still don't know if he's going to be 1,000% per se. Now he'll be out there hopefully on the field putting up points against a Raiders secondary that he can produce against. The point being here is that the Cowboys' offensive passing arsenal is down at least Amari Cooper, and if CD can't overcome that hurdle, it'll just be Michael Gallup out there. So they're going to have to be more Ezekiel Elliott dependent, and that gives him a nice situation here for this week. David Montgomery at number 10 taking on the Detroit Lions. Montgomery had one of his best performances of the season. Earlier on this year when he took on the Lions, he actually got injured in that game. That's where that knee injury came from that caused him to miss a healthy chunk of time. But he found the end zone twice, was putting up some decent yards. If he can do that again this week with the team being down Justin Fields and starting Andy Dalton here, I think there's an opportunity for David Montgomery to actually outperform this number 10 ranking spot. Now we are giving him a generously high marker considering the last 2 weeks of production, but this is still a workhorse running back I have faith in. The Bears like to run the football, and they usually do so at an effective rate. This is a very easily competitive football game in the sense that I don't expect the Bears to be trailing the Lions per se. That's what I mean by that. So I think Chicago will have the stranglehold of clock management and time of possession as long as they can at least minimize the offensive output of a hobbled Jared Goff, who sounds like he's going to make the start David Montgomery's playing on Thanksgiving today as well. So I think that Montgomery should be able to have borderline RB1 numbers. And again, one of the stronger performances that we've seen from him to this point in the season. James Robinson at number 11 here taking on the Atlanta Falcons. Not an overly easy matchup. The Falcons are actually, in my opinion, a little bit of a sneaky under-the-radar rushing defense, but they did get gashed the last time we saw them on the field taking on the Patriots. Ramondre Stevenson and Damien Harris were bowling them over, but that Pats offensive line is also very sturdy as well. The Falcons, though, are on a long week of rest. They played last Thursday, so they are, 10, 11 days of rest into the week now. Jacksonville came off an ugly loss last week, but James Robinson found the end zone and was able to salvage his fantasy scoring output. I think this game gives James the better opportunity to have 4 quarters of production, actually get more meaningful touches, and hopefully give us more production in the rushing department with his yards totaled. So J-Rob, a player I like here as a fringe RB1 in 12-team leagues. And then Darrell Henderson taking on my Green Bay Packers off of a bye week, a Packers defense that is really banged up with some brutal injuries that has been sustained over the past few weeks now. I say this every time I talk about Darrell Henderson. He's not an elite talent at the running back position, but he's a very complete player. If the Rams have cinched things up since we've last seen them on the field, they should come out here, move the football, and have some very successful, sustained drives. And if that's the case, I could very easily see Darrell Henderson getting into the end zone and finding himself pay dirt once or twice in this contest. And if that's the case, again, we're going to get some great numbers out of him. Saquon Barkley, now this is one where we have to be cautiously optimistic with Saquon. The situation is really what's concerning here. And obviously last week wasn't all that fantastic of production. Jason Garrett, their OC, got fired after that loss to Tampa Bay on Monday night. And now Freddie Kitchens will be taking over play calling. So we're going to see how that impacts Saquon Barkley's situation with the Giants the rest of this season, and especially from a fantasy perspective. But this week against the Philadelphia Eagles, I'm trying to stay relatively neutral. I don't want to classify that Jason Garrett firing as a positive or a negative. Giants fans can say what you want, but it's been a rough time for an extended number of years now, and it's really hard to point your finger to exactly what the issue is outside of maybe at this point we can all blame Dave Gettleman for their disappointments. But in terms of their actual production on the field on Sundays, Dave Gettleman's not out there. So it'll be interesting to see, does this team take a step forward offensively with Jason Garrett out of the situation, or will they pull back even further and have some disorganization? That's going to be something that we're going to have to watch. The Eagles haven't been an overly dominant rushing defense this season, but they have been an opportunistic defense that makes plays. Darius Slay actually has 3 touchdowns this year. That doesn't really factor into Barkley's matchup all that much. But again, the Eagles do have some playmakers that can make things happen on that defense. So if the Giants are able to sustain some level of offensive success, I think Barkley's got a shot to finish a lot higher on this list. But if they struggle, turn the football over, and don't really sustain drives, Saquon could be in for yet another ugly performance. A.J. Dillon at number 14 taking on the Rams. I would like to say A.J. Dillon should be higher on the list, but after watching how Green Bay used him last week against Minnesota, I have some reservations. I have some concerns. I'm again going to be cautiously optimistic. Now, the logic of the situation would tell you that the Packers should run the football a healthy amount against the Rams, who the last time out we saw struggle against the 49ers when they just pounded the rock with Deebo Samuel and Elijah Mitchell. And yes, those of you who didn't watch that game, Deebo Samuel has been playing a fair share of snaps at running back and absolutely dominating defenses when that's the case. So, A.J. Dillon without Aaron Jones should be a very healthy fantasy option here. Now, obviously, this changes if for some reason some unexpected news comes out of left field and Aaron Jones is going to play in this contest. But if A.J. Dillon is the lone back there and Patrick Taylor is left to man that backup position in Green Bay, I'm going to take A.J. Dillon as a high-end RB2 this week. I think there's a chance, and again, the expectation should be that Green Bay runs the football a healthy amount of times. I think this game could get really ugly for the Packers if they don't run the ball enough because of how banged up their offensive line is. They're still going to be down David Bakhtiari this week. It sounds like one of the best left tackles in pro football the last time we saw him out there on a field last season. And Elton Jenkins, Green Bay's next best offensive lineman, who is essentially a Pro Bowl player at any position on the offensive line, tore his ACL last week. So you're down your 2 top offensive linemen. Your starting center, rookie Josh Myers, who was drafted in the 2nd round, was putting up very, very impressive debut performances at the beginning of the year. He's been out for a while now. You're looking at 3 potential backups against a hellacious pass rush, which includes Aaron Donald, Von Miller, and then on the back end, you've got Jalen Ramsey clamping up Davante Adams potentially. So if the Packers don't run the football, this game could get out of hand and very messy very quickly. So we're hoping that the Packers resort to relying on the run game a little bit more this week. And ultimately, I think if that's the case, A.J. Dillon can have a very productive performance. Antonio Gibson taking on Seattle, my number 15 running back. So we're starting to get to the end of that top tier of RB2s. This is a fantastic matchup, though. The Seattle Seahawks have been one of the worst units against opposing fantasy running backs. And when Antonio Gibson, who's not being overly involved as a receiving threat and being thrown as many passes as I'd like to see this season so far, is still getting the amount of rushing attempts he's been seeing the last couple of weeks out since that shin issue has seemed to fade away into something we're not really talking about anymore. I like the opportunity here. Gibson could potentially have some really efficient numbers this week. Again, Seattle has been struggling against almost all opposing rushing attacks. And Antonio Gibson, who saw 19 touches in the run game last week, and I believe 24 the week prior, should have a very easy go about things here in a matchup, again, where his offensive line has been healthier the last couple weeks as well. Leonard Fournette, number 16, taking on Indianapolis. This is one where you don't really feel overly advantageous about the matchup against the Colts, but I'm also not too afraid of it either. Now, the Colts' rushing defensive numbers are a little bit inflated right now after how minuscule the numbers the Bills had last week were, and honestly, how the game scripts have been playing for teams facing the Colts lately, because they've been running up scores and making teams pass late because they've just been playing good football. I'm not really afraid of the Colts defensive front shutting down Leonard Fournette, but the one concerning thing is that the Buccaneers are 31st in rushing attempts this season. So it's not like there's an insanely large amount of volume heading Leonard Fournette's direction on the ground. Now, what's become an interesting interesting factor in Leonard Fournette's fantasy outlook every week has been the receiving involvement, because while Giovanni Bernard seems like he's that stereotypical James White running back for Tampa Bay's offense, Leonard Fournette has also given us very respectable numbers in that facet of things as well. And while he's no elite receiving back, those are still valuable fantasy points, efficient yardage being put up here. And then when you get those passes caught in those PPR formats, something to consider and take into evaluation when we're projecting these numbers for a week-to-week basis. So overall, I feel very meh about Leonard Fournette this week. I think the production will be reliable, though, and that's what I like here. That's why he reaches up to technically our number 4 overall RB2 in 12-team formats for Week 12. I think he'll get the job done. I think he'll give us reliable stat production, but ultimately I don't know how high the ceiling is this week. That's not something I'm really projecting too high from him. Miles Sanders at number 17. Now, this is a player who I think could go either way. I think that he has a nice baseline that he showed he can settle into last week. 16 rushing attempts. That was a season high coming off of an injury. 94 yards rushing against the Saints. Another number that makes me feel very good, but he did lose a fumble. The Giants are an exploitable matchup, and being such an explosive player that Miles Sanders is, I think the ceiling could grow higher than this number 17 overall assessment, but the overall concern lies within Miles Sanders simply not getting enough rushing attempts. We've seen one game of encouraging numbers from him. I do think that will carry over to the rest of the games this season, but still we don't have a large sample size since he's returned from that injury that'll actually be the case. I think he could be in for a large workload with Jordan Howard's health not in good shape, not likely he's going to play. And you've got, again, the Eagles coaching staff, which has been more apt to run the football since Miles Sanders initially went down with his injury. What was that, 4 or 5 weeks ago now? So I think there's a lot of opportunity for Sanders here against the Giants in Week 12. I like the upside again, and if he can break off one of those big carries, I think we could just get some very nice ceiling numbers. Cordarrelle Patterson, I'd like to have him higher on the list today as well. Only at number 18, but I love the matchup against Jacksonville. The big red flag, and not that it's overly large, is health. So essentially, if he's out there ready to play and feels good to go, I'm comfortable moving Cordarrelle Patterson up the list. But if that's not the case, obviously the Falcons are probably overall going to struggle a lot offensively. We saw that last week. The Pats absolutely crushed them, whether it was Matt Ryan getting sacked every other second or it was him literally being depleted every time he would get rid of the football. They had no running game, scored 0 points offensively. It was a brutal show to watch. They need to see Pat back in this offense. They are going to get him the football if he's out there. So if Cordarrelle is ready to go and healthy for this contest, he could absolutely finish higher than the number 18 spot. Eli Mitchell, this is one where I feel more so that his ceiling isn't going to be something that explodes out of the stat sheet and moves him up this list, but I do feel very comfortable with the floor numbers we can get from him against Minnesota. They've been playing good defense lately. Now their secondary is the weakness of this team, but I think that San Francisco, the physical style of football they've been playing the last couple of weeks now has been very impressive, and if that continues to be the case, and note, Eli Mitchell is another player dealing with injury. That moves him down the list a little bit more today as well. If he's not healthy, clearly that factors into the situation. He actually missed last week's game with that finger issue when he was expected to be able to go earlier on in the week. So monitor Elijah Mitchell's health. If you've got him on your roster for your fantasy leagues, that's going to be a crucial point of emphasis for making sure that your team and your lineup has the maximum amount of upside available to it. But if he's able to get the start, if it sounds like he's made it out of the woods for that finger and rib issue, I'm putting him in the lineup as a steady RB2 play or a safer flex option this week. Josh Jacobs, now this is where things start to take a little bit more of an even duller turn south. Josh Jacobs is simply a player who I think has a very capped ceiling. There was very encouraging numbers the first couple of weeks post-Gruden. He was getting more passing volume attempts. But since then, the Raiders' overall quality of football they've been playing has been on the decline, and it's been deteriorating. And in turn, when Las Vegas is not playing as good of football, they're trailing in games. That means less rushing attempts and overall volume for Josh Jacobs. And when you can't run the football, and when you put your team in a position where you're not able to run effectively, that sets up everything to just turn into a stockpiling disaster. And when you're forcing your hand to throw over and over again, Derek Carr's taking more sacks, he's getting hit more, and he's making more reckless decisions. That's limiting Josh Jacobs' upside and floor. But against Dallas, this is, again, a tougher matchup in terms of the ability and the expectation I have for Las Vegas's passing game, which I think, again, affects Josh Jacobs as a runner because the less dynamic and balanced you're able to be, the more strain that puts on either your passing or rushing attack. I would expect very average and very vanilla numbers here. I'm hoping Josh Jacobs can reach his lower end RB2 floor that I've got set for him this week. If that's the case, I'll be very excited. I'll be happy for those of you that are starting Josh Jacobs, but I'm not feeling too optimistic with him rolling out into the lineup. Melvin Gordon at number 21 is a player who I went back and forth with having above Josh Jacobs, but if everything goes right for Josh Jacobs and if Las Vegas is able to stick in that game, I expect Jacobs to see more touches and have more opportunities. That's what gets him the edge over Gordon here at 21. But I think Melvin Gordon's efficiency will be better per touch against the Chargers, which is a more favorable matchup. I think Gordon has just as good of a shot to see goal line reps as a Josh Jacobs does this week. And really the only thing that holds Melvin down lower on the list is that Javonte Williams is still a significant factor in this offense. But for teams out there who are in need of an RB2 start, I feel very comfortable with Melvin Gordon as a floor play that could potentially burst in the end zone and get you another 6 on top of his rushing productivity. And he's also dabbling around in the receiving game as well, catching a few passes or seeing a few targets here and there on a week-to-week basis as well. So Gordon, someone I feel decent about here in Week 12. Damien Harris at number 22, taking on Tennessee. This is a situation I'm keeping my eye close on with Ramondre Stevenson's production lately and the amount of reps and success he's had touching the football. We loved him here at SFS coming out of Oklahoma. His skill set, his big frame and large size, his even elusiveness at times and ability to catch the football at a decent level. I think it's a reasonable threat to Damien Harris's workload on a week-to-week basis. We'll see how Bill deploys these running backs weekly now that Damien is really out of the clear for concussion protocol. He was still kind of a toss-up until last Thursday when the Pats played the Falcons. He cleared concussion protocol, looked great in the amount of touches he got, but was out-touched by Ramondre Stevenson. So something to keep your eye on here for sure. The Titans are no joke of a rushing defense, and they've actually been playing some respectable defense as of late, as opposed to their back end's a little bit weaker, and that can be exploited. But Damien Harris, keep your eye on the Patriots this week. That's something I would keep an eye on. Myles Gaskin at number 23, taking on Carolina. Just one more name on the list for today. Myles Gaskin simply is inconsistent, and his production is unreliable. He'll come out here every once in a while, have an efficient game, catch the football at a nice clip, and put up a very respectable RB2 performance, but then he'll come out the next week and struggle to get any traction. He'll have less than 40 yards rushing and will put up virtually no points. So it's hard to know what to expect from this Dolphins backfield on a week-to-week basis, and Myles hasn't been scoring touchdowns at the rate he was last year when he wasn't even really churning them out at a super high level. So Gaskin, I've got very low and managed expectations for him. He could just come out here, again, like I said, catch 10 passes and have a great game in PPR for you. But overall, the Carolina Panthers are not a terrible run-stopping unit. They have allowed some efficient performances, for example, to a Ramondre Stevenson throughout this season. But I think that this is no guarantee to be a quality performance from him. And then Javonte Williams, the other man in that Denver Broncos backfield, I just like the matchup here. I expect him to touch the football a few less times than Melvin Gordon. I expect Melvin Gordon to command the majority of the goal line opportunities, and ultimately that makes him a more valuable fantasy player at this time. I would freaking love to see Javonte Williams unleashed and just let go loose for the fantasy playoff season. The schedule is great for the Broncos down the stretch here. He could be a league-winning player if he ends up getting the reins to this offense, but the closer and closer we get to that time, the signs have not been there, and that is something that's a little bit worrisome. But this week, if you are in dire and desperate need of a RB2 level player, I think Javonte has some salvageable lineup potential and could be a player that will have an influence on leagues and matchups this week. So Javonte next season, that is certainly going to be the big ticket time for Mr. Williams here. We'll see if he can cash in on that upside this season. But I'm really looking forward to next year when Melvin Gordon is not on contract any longer for Denver, and he finally gets that 3-down workhorse role. All right, there you guys have it. It looks like we made that 30-minute threshold, so I'm pretty proud of myself. We didn't actually go an extra 15 minutes when we certainly could have today. But we want to get you guys, again, having a very good Thanksgiving, visiting with family and friends, and just having a great day. So enjoy some football, eat some turkey, and check out those players feasting up those fantasy points throughout this afternoon. And go check out Thrive Fantasy while you do it. Promo code Sizzle. That'll get you that match between $10 and $100 and a free month of SFS Gold when you play your first contest. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'll see you all next time. Peace out.